Welcome, everybody. It's so good to see all of you. And I just wanted to take a moment to introduce myself. My name is Kristen Violet, and I'm a Newtown High School computer science teacher. And I'm also a member of the Coalition of Women and Girls at the Governor's Office. And we are on the subcommittee of STEAM and Education, which got together to bring this challenge to you. I know that you've been hearing about the challenge and you already know about it. Some of you are already participating. So I won't spend a lot of time explaining that, but I'm here tonight with my dear friend and colleague, Rachel Smith, and I'll give a moment for her to introduce herself.
Hi, as Kristen said, I'm a colleague of Kristen. We met at Newtown, where I taught middle school computer science. And I'm just so excited to talk to you about all these fun, different resources you can use to help your students tackle this really cool challenge.
Great. So that's a great lead way into what we're doing tonight. As you know, that we are in the Lieutenant Governor's Computing Challenge. And tonight we are doing the third session of our bi-weekly webinar series. The first session was an introduction to the challenge. In the second session, we had the members of the CSTA present to you on how to support your students throughout the challenge, primarily focusing on the ideation with the problem, identifying a problem, and then coming up with a computing solution that embraces the theme coding for good. So tonight we're going to take that step a little bit further, and we are going to talk to you about resources that are available to support the challenge. So tonight's goal is to overwhelm you with choices. Okay, so just let's put that out there right now. So with that being said, so as you know, there are, whoops. All right. So as you know, there are 3 challenges. We have the concept challenge where you are primarily focusing on ideation. We have the prototype challenge where you will do some coding, and you'll have the development challenge where you'll do more coding. And I'm keeping it that simple because we're not going to try and pigeonhole these resources necessarily into one challenge or the other, but rather show you these resources and how they can be applied to different the process of each challenge. So as you know, we have our website with all of this information here, and I encourage you to continue to check back for additional resources. We're going to talk tonight about 3 stages of the challenges. So the first stage is obviously brainstorming, coming up and identifying a problem that your group would like to address, and then also a possible coding or computing solution that they'd like to build. After that, we're going to talk a little bit about how would you plan for the program to be developed after you identified a problem and a solution, and then how do you actually code it. So that's the framework that we're going to be working in here this evening. And Rachel and I will kind of go back and forth and talk about some of the resources that we've used before, that we've enjoyed, that we've had success with, and some that we just heard about and think are pretty cool that we might need to check out ourselves. So here we're going to talk about how do we come up with a problem. Last week, the members of the CSTA did an amazing job talking about how to step through and scaffold for your students, how to identify a problem in their society, in their world that they would like to address. So once you have that problem, there's some tools that we can use to kind of help develop that problem and kind of brainstorm ideas. So on the right-hand side, you'll see at a glance, these are the tools that we'll talk about in this section. So I believe most of us probably already know about Google Docs. We're in a school where all teachers are library media specialists on this webinar. However, this is for all of Connecticut youth. So we are hoping to encourage Boys and Girls Clubs, the Girl Scouts of Connecticut, and other groups that may not be surrounded with the Google Docs like we primarily are in the school system. So we just want to bring it to your attention that Google Docs is an amazing place to share ideas and to brainstorm. Obviously, you know that you can collaborate in real time, that students can edit or comment on different ideas. And what's great about it is that everything is captured, right? So if there's an oops moment, we can always go to the history and kind of look back. So we just kind of wanted to start off slow and just remind you that you probably have access to tools that you can use in this brainstorming or ideation process. Rachel, do you want to tell us a little bit about this tool?
Sure. So for those of you who haven't used it, Google Jamboard is a really fun collaborative tool. It's a simple digital whiteboard, just like imagine a chalkboard. When I was a student, we had a chalkboard, but now they're all the whiteboards where you can draw with markers, and it kind of works the same way. Students can add images, they can add Post-it notes, they can make little, unique shapes. But my favorite tool, and I think the favorite of most of my students, is the drawing. So it is limited on color selection, but that's okay. It's a real-time tool, so they can share their ideas in real time. Or if they're working on it separately at different times, they can still see what their teammates have written up there. So it's a fun tool. You can even create a Jamboard during a Google Meet. So a lot of us are familiar with Meet because we're teachers. But in the midst of your Meet, you can create one. And I think many students, probably not everyone, but many students will be familiar with the idea of writing on a whiteboard, even if they haven't used Jamboard before. It's really easy for them to pick it up.
Great. Another collaborative tool you can do some brainstorming and some mind mapping is Mindmeister. We were playing around with this, Rachel and I, in preparation for this, and you can see the example on the slide is that you're able to come up with a central idea and then build off of those ideas. So you can have sub ideas and sibling ideas. It's very collaborative. You can move these bubbles along around the screen. And then of course it supports not only text, but also images and emojis. So that's always a big hit, right? So this is a great place for students to kind of brainstorm and map ideas and to kind of build off of each other's ideas in a very graphic way.
So I'm going to jump in and talk a little bit about Padlet. This is a fun tool that's been around for a while, and it's kind of like if you would picture a bulletin board, and students can double click anywhere on the screen, or there's a little pink plus sign in the bottom right corner, and then they can create a Post-it note. And what's neat is that the Post-it notes can be text, but they can also include links to a website or images. You can use your camera. You can record some audio, you can record a video. There's so many different things. And again, it's collaborative. So students are, especially because of the pandemic, we're separated. So we're on different devices, but yet contributing to the same sort of brainstorming tool. And another thing that my students have really enjoyed is voting on ideas. So you can see it in the picture in the bottom left corner of the sticky note. There's a little thumbs up, and there are different ways that you can vote in Padlet. So you can have them do thumbs up, you can have a heart, all sorts of ways that they can vote. And when you create your Padlet, you can adjust that pretty easily in the settings. So that is Padlet.
So that's a handful of tools for you to hopefully collaborate and identify ideas that students have and be able to build off of them. Of course, I'm sure you have your own tools and there's plenty more out there, but we just wanted to provide you with a small subset of tools that we have used in our classrooms and that the kids tend to enjoy, right? Whenever you can add some color and an emoji, you get more, it's a bigger win, right? So once I've identified a problem and a possible solution, like, wouldn't it be cool if, and you realize that you have an idea and your team is ready to run with it. The next step that we want to talk to you about is planning your program or your coding solution. This not only is only just for the prototype and the development challenge, but also this is a step in the concept challenge, right? Because the concept challenge, you want to create an idea and you'll answer some written responses, but you also need to create an audio visual that kind of talks about, well, how do you think your program would look or work if you were to develop it? So this can help those students as well. So again, you can always do the classic, pull out the pen and paper and draw and things like that. But in our digital world and with our students being at home and school, it's good to always have a handful of online tools. So we're going to talk to you a little bit about that. And we're going to see that Padlet makes a second appearance. I'm sure there's a delay, but
Is it going? It's stuck.
I don't know.
Oh, hey, there it is.
Yes.
Okay, so when you create a Padlet, there are different layouts you can choose. And so one that I've used in kind of a different way is the timeline layout, because I found that it can help illustrate maybe the flow of the program, what happens first, what happens next, what happens third. And it works the same way as any other Padlet view or layout, sorry. Sticky notes, or you can upload a link, you can take a photo, you can put screenshots on there, whatever students would like to do. And on the right, you can see there's even a place where students could put a Post-it note in which they draw, they doodle. And that's a really fun, I think students really like that. Anytime they can draw silly things. So it's a different way to use Padlet, but it still can be, I think it can be really beneficial and fun for students to plan out their programs.
And of course, we all have access to Google Slides. And not only can it be used to create a presentation, but we've been learning how to use tools in a little bit more different and more creative ways in our new arrangement here at school. So what you're seeing here is an example it's just an animated GIF here that kind of shows a student's project, right? So this person was developing a school app, and you can kind of see the different user interfaces or the screens that would be in this coding solution. So you can use Google Slides to also create a visual of what your program is going to look like. Whether you're doing the concept challenge, the prototype challenge, or the development challenge, we all want to kind of visualize what our program would look like. On the flip side, Google Slides can also be used as part of developing the flow. So we see it here on the left-hand side, how we can show what our program is going to look like. And on the right-hand side is kind of an image or a diagram to show how could it function. So there's just a simple example there that, hey, on my app, a student's going to fill out a form. And if they fill it out completely, then they'll go to a results page. If they don't fill it out completely, then they get to an error page. So they might want to use the diagram structure and the hierarchy choice in the diagrams to create a flow to show how your app or program would function. There's a couple other tools that we're going to talk about, how we could illustrate not only what our user interface looks like to our user, but how the user would actually interact with that user interface and see the program work.
So one of those tools is called Storyboard That. And it's such a fun tool because it almost works like students are creating a comic strip in a way. That's kind of how it feels. But what I've had them do is create essentially like what happens first in your program or app, what happens second, what happens third, storyboard it out, just like you might plan out a commercial or a movie before you actually film it. And so I found that to be helpful, but then I haven't done it a lot, but students can use it to create a flow chart. So we're talking about like what happens when the program is run. And then the third thing that they really get into is that if you need assets or graphics, such as some characters or a background, very fun and simple to customize what the character or the background looks like. And you can get very specific about things like the color of the character's shirt or that sort of thing. So I think my caution is that sometimes my students will get so caught up in the little tiny details, which is fantastic because I'm excited that they're excited, but sometimes it's helpful to refocus them. But that's Storyboard that. It's a really fun tool.
Maybe not as fun as Storyboard that because it's lacking the background in the characters. Here we have Lucidchart, but this is extremely functional. You can see by the screen capture here, there's oodles of flowchart elements that you can use. And on the right-hand side is a simple example of that I created for how do you choose your challenge here at the Lieutenant Governor's Computing Challenge. And this might help students if they're going to develop their program, how to get it to flow and to work. Now, this may be appropriate for certain grade levels over some over the other, but I think it's a nice tool for kids to start to think about, when I do click this button, where is it going to bring me? And what happens if they leave something blank? Is there an error? Do they go back? So it's that sort of critical thinking that when you really sit down and think about how your app or your program is going to function and what direction it's going to go for the user, that's the kind of thinking that we're trying to develop with our students. So Lucidchart is an online free tool that you can use and export your flow charts, as I've done here as in the example. And then another online tool that you may want to take a look at is once you've figured out how it's going to flow, you could actually use Mockflow to help develop what's called a wireframe. So you can see here in the examples that it kind of provides more of a detailed simulation of what your user interface would look like if you were to mock it up and see how it would flow and how the controls would work. So again, this might not be great for the younger grades, unless you never know, but it's definitely worth taking a look at because it does have accessibility and different, you can make it as complex as you want. So now that we've talked about coming up with an idea, we have a really good plan in place. We've used an online tool to kind of sketch out what we think our interface is going to look like and gave some thought to how it would function or how the user would interact with our program or app. It's really time to get to the coding part of it. And all of us will have tools that perhaps we've used, your students may have used. But again, our job here tonight is to overwhelm you with a bunch of choices. And we're going to encourage you just to kind of just take it in and see what's available to you. And we tried to choose all tools that were free because, free is for me. So hopefully you can see here at the glance, we have quite a selection for you and we'll kind of step you through those quickly as well. While this is primarily for the prototype and the development challenge, we highly encourage you, even if you think the students are going to only submit to the concept challenge, why not encourage them to say, okay, well, how would that look? Why don't you turn on one of these tools? And you'd be amazed at how far the students can get with some of these because they're so user-friendly. So we'll show you how user-friendly some of them are. And what's really cool is that some of them really not only focus on the coding aspect, but try and embrace other interests for students as well. So here in VidCode, you have some programming, but what's kind of unique about this is that the base of it is video, right? So if you have a student who, has themselves maybe skateboarding or dancing or playing a game or something like that, they can import their own video and then write code that interacts with their video. So I found that to be a little bit more intriguing for some of my students. So if you have somebody who, or a group of people who might be interested in that, it might be a good place for you to start. Of course, it also works with images and texts and different types of graphics, but it really allows you to kind of interact and move different objects around with the video. Another one that is kind of embracing other skills or interests for students is pencil code. I know this is a favorite for some people here. And pencil code not only allows you to have some tutorials, but it also allows you obviously to create your own. All of these will provide you with some tutorials, but also allow you to, play in the sandbox and develop your own program. But as you see here in the images, and perhaps you might be able to, and of course you hear my cat talking to you as well. That's Sadie Squirrel. So anyway, you'll see that pencil code here really embraces students who are interested in drawing. They call it the jam. So if you have a musical student, that there's a lot of great tutorials and some sandbox playing, if you will, with people who are interested in drawing or music. And then also if you wanted to create a story, I really like this Imagine tab because you can start to think about, a kind of choose your own adventure story. So this isn't I don't think your average coding sites because it embraces other aspects and interests of students.
Okay, so Bitsfox is, I think, one of my all-time favorite resources. What you're looking at is an example of an app that a student coded illustrating the states of matter. So it's a text-based programming language that uses JavaScript. It's a little bit simpler version of JavaScript. It is definitely marketed toward younger grades, but I've used it with my middle school students with really great success. They have simple to use tutorials. Students type in the code, but what's neat is that the code, when you're just learning how to do it, it tells you what to type and you type it below. Then you hit play and you actually see it working on your screen. I love that you can test it on a device. So students can take an iPad or a phone or a Kindle and they can scan in the QR code and it gets automatically opened on that device. And so it works as kind of like a web-based app. And it's very, very fun because they have so many different assets, thousands and thousands of like funny pictures and backgrounds and movements. And so I find that it takes a while for them to get the sillies out of themselves. So even though they're middle schoolers, I will say, okay, let's actually figure out, how this function works or how to do that. But I just can't tell you how much fun I've had with Bitsfox. So it's something just to explore, even if you're teaching high school, play around with it to see if it might be a fit for your students. And of course, there's Scratch. And what's lovely about Scratch is that many students are familiar with it. It's a really popular block-based platform created by MIT. There are lovely step-by-step tutorials that are really simple or more complicated. What I've always felt about Scratch is that even though it looks simple, you're dragging and dropping blocks, it's so powerful that you can do more advanced programming with it. I do believe that at least initially, depending on what you're trying to do, it is an easier learning curve. And it's, as you can see by the picture of the Scratch cat, it's very kid friendly. So it's definitely something to explore. And of course, it's free, and that's always the best.
Also from MIT, they provided us with Scratch, and they also provided us with App Inventor. So I know some of us are already using App Inventor. It is block-based as well, and you can see that the blocks are color-coded just like with Scratch. So that kind of helps with the learning. Also helps us with the teachers in case you're not sure of the blocks. The colors do help indicate things for you. And you can also see that there's a user interface here. This is based for creating mobile apps, and I'm happy to announce that just this week, they finally have mastered using App Inventor with Apple devices. But even if you don't have a device, there is an online emulator, so you're able to build your program and be able to test it effectively, whether you have an Android device, an Apple device, or just using the online emulator. So I think that this is a great place for students to start. And a lot of students, when they come into a coding challenge, they instantly think app, right? And a lot of them are called app challenges. But our goal here, this is an app development program, but you'll notice that every program up until this point is really talking about either a web app or developing a program using different video or different coding. So App Inventor is very user-friendly and a big hit with the kids. And again, don't be mistaken or fooled by how simplistic the block programming looks. It's very sophisticated.
Okay, just to add something, I have done App Inventor with third graders before, and they did an amazing job. So next up is a wonderful resource from code.org, which most students are familiar with because of the Hour of Code. So there's a lot of familiarity with there, and they can feel comfortable. Oh, I know this platform. I know what it looks like. App Lab allows students to create essentially an app. It lives in a browser, and they can use that block-based language, or they can create text-based apps. There are lots of really helpful tutorials. It uses JavaScript, which is really cool in terms of showing students, hey, what does it look like behind those blocks? And you can show them, here's what it looks like in blocks. But then if you click this button, you can see what the actual code looks like. Let's read through it and see if we can make sense of it. And it's just a fascinating tool. I had a student in 8th grade create an app that was designed to help you identify what type of workout you wanted to do that day. And so it was almost like a choose your own adventure sort of thing. And it was a lot of fun. So definitely you want to check out code.org's App Lab.
So in addition, as Rachel just said, that there is cool thing about App Lab is that you can see the blocks and also see the codes. That's really unique. I like that a lot about that feature. Here we have Code HS, which is just text-based coding. But what's really great about Code HS is that they have free courses in all sorts of topics, hundreds of topics. And not only just computer science, but they also have topical and subject matter-based courses as well. So you are able to step through and learn right along with your students. But they also have a sandbox, which is an area that they can design their own program and again, test it in their online IDE. So what you're seeing here is the code that's a student wrote. And then there's the run code on the side, on the right side, and you can see the end result of this person's program. So Code HS is free, and there is a paid portion for teachers, but that's just for grading and things like that. So it's an amazing resource that's available to all of us. And this one is pretty new to me as well. And I think I found my new favorite online tool, because if you haven't gone here before, I think you're going to be amazed. So, and If you look to the image, you'll see there's a bunch of small images to the right. And one of them is a picture of an Arduino, one's the Lego robot. We have Minecraft and microbits. And what's great about Microsoft Make Code is that it allows you to code working with all of these products. There's also an online simulator as well. So typically, if you have these products, you're working with a particular language or particular piece of software to kind of make your Arduino sense something, or your robot to move, or your microbit to react. But here in one place, you can use this Make Code, and that'll interact with all of these programs. And if you don't have these products, then you have the simulator online. So that's really cool, especially for people who might be interested in circuitry. They can kind of play around with Arduino without having to have an Arduino. And this is also great because it also has an arcade feature. And I think we are all pretty confident in stating that our students are interested in gaming. So if you can embrace gaming in this challenge, that's probably a win. So I personally am going to start embracing this a lot more in some of my classes. And I do like that it's block-based and text-based. So that allows me to kind of differentiate with my kids as a teacher, but also within your own group for the challenge, right? You can have all your students or your team members try to code something, and then they can choose whatever they're comfortable with, block-based or text. So I think that's pretty cool. So I'm giving this a 2 thumbs up.
Yes, it's a fun website. And if you haven't had a chance to play with the microbit, it's a really great and affordable resource. But moving on to Swift Playgrounds. So sometimes there are students who are just so eager and excited to about the idea of programming in Apple's language. And one of those more accessible languages is Swift. And so Apple came out with this app called Swift Playgrounds, and it can work on an iPad or a Mac, and it's a free app. It offers students the chance to learn text-based programming, and of course the language is Swift. And it's a really fun way to learn about coding. I will tell you, I don't have a lot of experience other than acting as a student and playing around with it myself, in terms of doing the different challenge levels. I found it to be really fun, and I did find those students who just love the iPad or love their iPhone lean more toward this sort of environment. So it's definitely something worth exploring. All right, so this is my personal favorite tool. It's called Replit. It's free. It is a text-based programming IDE. So it's essentially a website that allows you to choose your favorite programming language. So the one I have here is in Python, and you can code out a program and then hit play or hit run and then see how it works. It is definitely a higher learning curve in terms of, like, you want your students who are interested in programming to already know a little bit about how to program. So if they just go to the website, it's simply a blank, canvas, and they have to start typing in code. But for those students who are at that level and they're like, yeah, I know Python, or I know this, just say go for it and play around with it. They just recently released a new teacher feature which allows you to be online the same time that the student is online, and you can kind of jump in and look at what they're coding and then help them out. I have not played with that, but it is really fun. So it's something, if you want to play around with it, and even for yourself, if you're interested in, learning a little bit more about programming and you're just like, all right, I want to do this for real and I want to test it out, play around with Replit. It's really good, and it's free.
It's free.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what you've seen here is a whole bunch of resources. I hope that you see that they range from the newbies to the experience, right? And some everywhere in between. And all of these are online, they're free, and they're accessible to all of us. But we do want to just kind of draw your attention that if you are a school in Connecticut, I know that we have some of our community partners that this may not be applicable, but it may be something that people want to know about, is that we have the Connecticut Education Software Hub. And you will see on this hub, it takes a moment to register. You can log in with your Google or Gmail. And this gives a list of compliancy pledged resources. So as you may or may not be aware, Connecticut passed the Public Act 16-189, which is centered on student data privacy. And so this is a great place for you to check if the software that you'd like to use in your school is accessible and available and has been compliancy pledged. So I just kind of want to draw this to your attention because I know in our schools, that's important to keep in mind with data privacy. And if you're a community partner, you may not necessarily have the Public Act that applies to you, but you may want to be conscious of it. Just to point out in this presentation, if you come back and visit it when the slide deck is available on our website, that each one of these logos will be a link to the online source. So when you come back here, you can simply find all of these resources that way. And of course, there's more stuff that we'll just quickly brief over here. I told you our goal is to overwhelm you here. And would you like to talk a little bit, Rachel, about citing images?
Oh, sure. So, most of us as educators know, but maybe sometimes we forget, or maybe you're watching this at a later date and you're not really sure, but it is always important to cite your images. So to give credit to the original creator of any image. And we have a couple of helpful resources for you. I'm especially fond of creativecommons.org. I always direct my students there to search for images. But also they're used to going to Google and looking, for images that way. So right below, you'll see there are some steps that will help guide students to images that are licensed by Creative Commons. And we want to make sure that they always give credit where credit is due.
Thank you. And there's a couple other resources here. As you know, with the challenge, each level will have you document your process either through an audio visual or a video of some sort. And while we are focusing primarily on the coding aspects and the ideation, we do want to just provide you with a few choices here for video or animation. You'll see that there's 3 links there that you can use with your students, and they're oodles of fun because who doesn't want to make an animation? So that might be something that you'd like to do. Of course, if you use your video, it can just be simply turn on your phone's camera, push video record, and you can make your video that way as well. But we want to provide you with a couple online resources. In addition to that, there are a couple templates. The top one is the App Design Journal. This was provided by Apple. This is also located on our website, which we'll just kind of review in just a moment. And then there's also a printable PDF app template or program template that is available, will be available just momentarily on our website. And then last but not least is, of course, our website. LTGovCC.org has got all the resources on the resource page, including where you signed up for this webinar. So I know that you're well aware of it, but I do just want to draw your attention to it, that as you are working with your students, this is a quick and easy way to kind of check out what is expected of your students and your members. You can see the scoring criteria as well as the prompts that they'll need to respond to. As you know, we have all of the webinars here, and once they are recorded, they are posted along with the accompanying slide deck And then at the bottom of our resources, this additional resources will continue to grow and eventually maybe fleshing it out into different categories. But you'll see here that we have this tips and tools document is very helpful. It was created by Jackie Corricelli, who is the president of CSTA, and outlines a lot of the tools that we shared with you today. And then Apple has provided us with a couple ideas as well. And if you get a moment, definitely click on this app design journal. It's not just for apps. It's a really great tool to step through the ideation as well as the planning process. So this will continually grow. And so I just want to draw your attention and encourage you to come back. So our final thoughts, and then we'll just see if there's any questions. We provided you with a lot of different tools, and I know some of them you've heard of and some of you have not heard of. Hopefully you feel encouraged to give it a go. But I want to encourage you to maybe show your students this, right? Have them click through this presentation and have them look at these different resources, because it's really a tool that they need to be comfortable with. We don't need to be comfortable with it because we're the mentor, right? We're the coach. We're here to cheer them on and provide support. We don't have to have all the answers, you know, and it's kind of empowering for students when maybe we don't have all the answers and they can look to each other. They'll help each other out. They'll ask for help. And if you feel that you are uncomfortable with that, we do have a mentoring program set up with some industry professionals. And so on that resource page, you can fill out whether or not you like to work with a mentor, or maybe you want to be a mentor, you know, in your spare time. So we're just trying to encourage you to just support your students anyway. We're here to help you. We're always open to suggestions. And, you know, we would like to know if you have any questions for us.